Joining us now, we have NBC's Vaughn Hilliard. He's reporting from West Palm Beach, Florida, near Mar-a-Lago. Former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo. He's an MSNBC political analyst. And in studio with us, Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor and professor at Georgetown School of Law and an MSNBC legal analyst. Vaughn, we're going to go ahead and start with you. Is this just, I mean, at this point, is DOJ going to Doge? What is going on at Social Security?
Hey, my friend, it's a good question, and there's a lack of transparency about exactly what their agenda is. Of course, when you're talking about accessing Social Security numbers and bank records and the fact that there are 70 million Americans who rely on Social Security payments, there's a lot of outstanding questions exactly what Elon Musk and his DOJ team are seeking to do. But Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary for the president, gave some indication. Take a listen.
There are a lot of unanswered questions, but that's exactly why these Social Security employees, I may add, are digging into the books and going line by line because past administrations have refused to do this very time-consuming but necessary work. And I want to emphasize that these are Social Security political appointees. These DOJ employees, these Social Security employees are onboarding as Social Security Administration employees, political appointees, and they have every right to administer President Trump's agenda.
Now, at this point in time, the Trump administration has not come forward with any evidence or any specific allegations of wrongdoing by any past Social Security Administration officials. There was an IG report done by the independent watchdog of the Social Security Administration just 8 months ago that found that 0.84% of benefit payments between 2015 and 2022 were improper. But that same report said that the majority of those payments were overpayments, not payments that were made to, quote, dead people, as Karoline Leavitt suggested that they could find tens of millions. And there was an IG report in 2023, we should know, Christina, as well, that found that there were about 20 million Americans that were still on the rolls, Social Security rolls, that were over the age of 100 years old. But that same IG report found that, quote, almost none of those individuals were still receiving Social Security disbursements.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard in West Palm Beach, Florida. Thanks, Vaughn. Congressman, I want to turn to you now. You know, you were elected as a Florida Republican. You know what it's like to have to answer to constituents. Do you expect Republican lawmakers' phones to start lighting up over this one? You know, Social Security is something that if you touch it, people start to get really concerned. What could the possible political response look like here?
Yeah, anytime there's some information, some news about either a data leak or private information accessed improperly, the phones on the Hill go off the hook and they ring and they ring and they ring all day. A lot of times staff is overwhelmed. So I have no doubt that members of Congress, their staffs have fielded many calls in the last 24 hours with questions about this Social Security news. And look, what could really get the administration into trouble here is not the what. I think most people can rally behind the idea of making government more efficient, making sure there are no improper payments in Social Security. That's a wonderful goal. What could really get them in trouble is the how. If they're doing this recklessly, if they're doing this in a way where there is a data leak, where people's private information does become public, then you could really see the public turn against this DOJ effort. And members of Congress, especially Republicans, who are already looking ahead to the 26th election, those members in swing districts are the first that are going to start complaining and pushing back against the administration.
And Paul, I want to talk to you about that how, because what we heard from Karoline Leavitt is she's stressing that it's agency employees doing the assessing. What impact does that have when these cases eventually probably end up in court? Does that make a difference?
It does. So there are agency employees that are accessing the data that might be super private, including medical records for people who've applied for benefits, and they're feeding this sensitive data to Elon Musk and to his DOJ team. And so the question that a lot of people have is DOJ really about good government, or is this a way for Trump and his team to try to get rid of federal employees who they don't like? And if you look at who is the new acting administrator, it's a mid-level employee personally selected by Trump and his team. In doing so, they leaped over 120 more senior leaders at Social Security to select this guy. We don't know exactly what his qualifications are, but we know he had a lot of posts on LinkedIn praising DOJ for what it's doing.
And is it like a distinction without a difference if the person pressing the keys is a federal employee, but the person looking over their shoulder reading the data is not?
No, because they're agents of the boss in this situation. Right. So we've seen at Treasury somebody quit because they didn't want to follow the order to access sensitive information there. And now we have the same thing at Social Security.
Carlos, I want to turn back to you. You know, we've seen the exodus of multiple senior officials we were just talking about who've kind of tried to stand in the way of DOJ, however we're saying it, accessing sensitive information. Do we know what the end goal is here for this data? And at what point does it matter to Trump supporters? Will it start impacting their approval of what's going on?
Well, look, until something breaks, I think the president and his team are going to have a lot of support for this idea of shaking up government, of making government more efficient, of getting rid of incompetence or excessive bureaucracy in government. And I think most Americans will get behind that, definitely the Trump base. But when something breaks, if something breaks, that's when this could really all come crashing down. If people's personal information gets leaked, if the way the administration is treating some of these employees, if there's lawsuits, and of course, whenever there's a lawsuit, there's a discovery process and a lot of information that otherwise wouldn't become public becomes public. If it appears that the administration is being abusive or cruel with federal employees who are simply trying to do their jobs, that's when the public could stop supporting this kind of effort. But for now, I do think that the administration does have plenty of latitude to continue operating in this space because the message that's out there is that they're simply trying to make government more efficient, shake things up a little bit. And I think a lot of Americans agree with that.
Paul, you know, we could get a decision from a federal judge in Washington, D.C. even today that could maybe limit Musk's team from accessing some of these systems or firing federal employees. It's Judge Tanya Chutkan, who we may know from some other high-profile cases around in D.C. She told an attorney representing more than 14 state attorneys general that she found the potential harm of DOJ's actions concerning and, quote, troubling, but that she needed to see more specifics aside from a, quote, generalized fear that this is going to happen. Where do you think she could land on this? What case law is she going to be looking at to evaluate this? And how could it impact other cases against DOJ?
Right. This is constitutional law. So the state attorney generals, the 13 state attorney generals who brought this lawsuit, say that Musk is acting like a cabinet secretary. Right. He's hiring and firing workers. He's overseeing how federal departments are structured, and he's talking about our tax paying, our tax dollars. Under the appointments clause of the Constitution, only the president has the power to nominate somebody with that authority, and that person's got to be confirmed by the Senate. So the judge said that she's very concerned about what is happening with Musk and DOJ. She's concerned, she says she's troubled, but she wants more specifics about who exactly is harmed while she decides this case. So they're asking for 2 weeks temporary order. The judge is considering it. She's going to issue a decision by tomorrow.